Okay, next up we have ARCTIS. ARCTIS, trading under the ASX code AR9 with a market cap of 28 million, is a global provider of innovative software solutions for the secure collaboration of sensitive information. The company's award-winning data-centric information security solutions protect the world's most sensitive content in government, defence, supply chain, enterprises and regulated industries through attribute-based access and control policies. Presenting for us today is ARCTIS CEO Daniel Lai. Daniel, welcome back and over to you.
Thank you very much, Paul, and thank you for everyone for joining us. Martin's already mentioned a couple of themes that where our company plays in, and that is obviously thematics are being driven by the unstable geopolitical situation and the growth in the defence markets. ARCTIS stands for Architected Trusted Information Sharing. It was established to resolve the global problem of sharing highly sensitive and classified information in the defence and national intelligence markets. And obviously they're primarily growing at the moment, and we're seeing all of that activity with the Ukraine, Middle East, and obviously the maneuverings in with China, and the growth of China is a large power in the world and contesting. We primarily exist to solve trust in that information sharing scenario with classified information, and we look at that between not only defence and intelligence agencies, both here in Australia but in the US and the UK, and AUKUS partners, Quad partners, Asia Pacific from Japan perspective, Singapore. We also look at that from the manufacturing defence industrial base, where we see a great opportunity to be the preferred provider of our products for information sharing to defence, but also the defence industrial base. And as you can see with those policies of AUKUS and the announcements just recently with the Department of Defence throwing in another $50 billion over the next 4 years to solve some of these problems, it's all underpinned by how do we share information with our allies, how do we share information between our forces, and how do we share information between our supply chain to support those activities. And that's where we're seeing the investment, because it's all underpinned by technology and digital data transfer. We empower information owners by our products enabling them to set the terms and conditions of how their information is shared. So if I'm working in BAE and I want to share information with the Department of Defence, and I'm working on a program jointly with Lockheed Martin, I can make sure that Lockheed Martin can't see that information, or if I do want them to see that information, I can set the terms and conditions about whether they can download it, whether they can't actually edit that document, whether they can pass that document on to their supply chain for partnering with those sorts of things. So it's a very integrated space. We're also the preferred partner with the largest provider of collaboration tool sets in the world, which is Microsoft. And we're engaged in a number of proof of concepts with them globally to set global patterns for information sharing between the key allied partners. So we're very much at the beginning of this journey, and we're the world recognised as the data-centric security experts in this profession. What are the types of problems we solve? We solve securely sharing information across the supply chain, between government agencies. We do that with structured and unstructured data, so documents as well as data sets. We also do that from mission edge to command and control centres as well. So a lot going on in this space at this point in time. So that's where we are. We're already established at this, and we're expanding. So we already are trusted to safeguard the world's most sensitive information, both here in the US and in Australia, and we're expanding that footprint. So how are we travelling? If we go to the next slide, I'll just give you a quick update on the numbers. I'm using our Q2 results. Obviously, Q3 is just about to come out, and I'd say that there's a common theme there of continued strategic execution. Obviously finished up there with a strong cash position of 5.7 million. We closed a number of significant deals which are very strategic, including BAE, Shipbuilding Australia, and also naval infrastructure organisations which share information between the most recently announced shipbuilding activities and investments going into not only Adelaide but in Perth as well. Revenue's up 144%. OPEX is down, so we're driving OPEX down, we're increasing our profitability, and we're heading towards cash flow neutral by the end of this calendar year. So very good, strong indicators there from the financials. Next slide, please. If we look into that a little bit more depth, you can see that in their licensing revenues, services revenues are a precursor for us to give an indication for our software pull-through. We are, as I said, a data-centric security company. Most of the organisations we work with need assistance in that, and that comes through those services. Those services then tend to pull through licensing, and obviously that increases your margin and drives your margin up. In our Q2 results there, EBITDA was up 90%. So that was very pleasing for us. Just moving forward. I mentioned a couple of deals there, the Australian Naval Infrastructure deal, BAE. You're starting to see a theme there about how we're penetrating our defence market, and that is in that shipbuilding space. People would be aware of the recent naval review and the surface warfare fleet, which is being currently invested in Hunter-class submarines, nuclear submarines from that. All of those areas need exchange of information between the US, the UK and Australia. And that's one of the key problems that we solve in this space. With the Australian Naval Infrastructure procuring our product Cogency to share information between all of the different entities that need to share information, we're in a key position for network growth. BAE as well, which is the largest defence prime in Australia, have brought us on to do some work. We successfully delivered that, and we expect to see an ongoing relationship building up new revenue opportunities for us over the coming 6 months. If we go to the next slide. So where are we in the market? Well, we see ourselves providing the market with a couple of different opportunities. We heard Martin say that the lower end of the market, particularly small micro caps, are undervalued at the moment. We certainly think that we're in that position, given the current thematics of we're in the fastest growing marketplace in the world at the moment, which is defence. It's expected to grow to $3.2 trillion. Japan just upped their defence GDP by 1%. We've just seen the announcement from Richard Marles continuing to up the Australian defence budget and expenditure coming into the next 4 years by $50 billion. But so it's really important in this sort of topsy-turvy market to make sure that you're effectively cash flow positive, so that you're not having to go back to the market to look for expensive capital. Even with those the financial market loosening up, it is a great place to be in. The second re-rate that we look for is we've been penetrating, and we're already in the Australian Department of Defence providing services, and they use our products. That's our genesis. But we think that there's a great opportunity over the next 6 to 8 months there to do an enterprise license with the Australian Department of Defence. There are many areas to do an enterprise license with, and I'll explain that in a little bit more detail, and significant international opportunities. So that's not only to corner and secure our revenue for the company in our home market, but also to demonstrate the global opportunities by winning a global opportunity overseas, to demonstrate the global applicability of our products more broadly. Next slide, please. Just to give you a key indication of the success we're having and the execution against our strategy, we are a premium provider of policy enforced access control products to defence for the digital transitions. And we're active in 6 out of 10 of the key defence divisions, and we're slowly growing that up, which is why we're seeing that opportunity to build that into an enterprise license model for the Australian Department of Defence. Services, as I mentioned, are part of that journey to help them guide them through the implementations. We have a number of proof of concepts that are in progress. I know that some of our investors get a little bit frustrated with those proof of concepts and seeing how fast they go, but they're complex, and the size of them is what's significant and important to us to make sure that we get those things right. If we move on to the next slide, we're also there to be the premium provider of policy enforced and access control products to defence industry. And what you can see here is a number of those big programs that interface into industry. CASG, which is the capability area of Defence and Sustainment Group, Joint Operations, VCDF, the digital Defence Digital Group, etc. Next slide, please. The Defence Industry Progress Report. Well, we are a large number of primes that use us already and are existing companies, and we're seeing a strong network growth from their use of the product through their supply chain. There is no standard software, a shared software platform for collaborating on information across the global supply chain for defence. That's the opportunity that we're confronted with. We have research and development organisations, SMEs, Kinetic, which is pretty big for an SME, Warmold, NIA, which develops the ammunitions for Australia, Northrop Grumman, BAE, Thales, SAP, Toll and Hanway, all big name primes that are using us currently. And, the activity there is very pleasing for the growth of those companies. Next slide, please. Something just to keep an eye out for what the potential of this is. Chris Diebel, who is in the Capability Acquisition and Sustainment Group, the Deputy Secretary, has announced that he's looking to develop an industry sharing cloud platform. That's something that's very exciting to us and a great opportunity that we see that could catapult the company and re-rate it over time. Next slide, please. Other announcements, as I mentioned, the $330 billion being, which is a further injection of another $60 billion over the next 10 years, but it's that $50.3 billion over the next few years and 5.7 over the next 4 years that it really excites us. And when you read the detail of that, there is a lot of that money is being spent on information management and cybersecurity, and of course that's where we are positioned. A portion of that is GDP, as I said, is increasing significantly for us. That is being spent on naval shipbuilding. It's being spent on drones. It's being spent on mesh warfare. It's also being spent on missiles. So, but under all of that is you need to share information not only between your allies but also between Central Command and the force execution of that. And that's where we're sitting at the moment. So that we see a strong opportunity there to execute our strategy. Next slide, please. So our journey is really about initially capturing the client. We generally do a proof of concept engagement with those, and then we draw in those licensing sales, and they're strong up to 80% margins there. So our targets really for this year is strong growth, revenue growth, closure of those POCs, and as I said, looking at getting towards cash flow neutral and driving down our expenses and operational expenses, which we're already, I think, on target. We've just done about a 40% decrease year-on-year comparison. So I think we're in an exceptionally strong position for future growth in a market which has strong themes. It's terrible for the markets to hear something like there's been a strike in Iran. None of us want that sort of problems or the humanitarian crisis that it causes, particularly in Gaza and in Israel and the Ukraine and Russia. But what that does tell you is one thing, is the nations are upping their defence expenditure. They're dependent upon sharing of information across there to support that and to secure their national security. And certainly for us, that's a primary driver of where we're seeing a bright future in terms of resolving some of these problems which are critical for national security. So that's my presentation. I'm quite happy to open up for questions.
Yeah, I know you're pressed for time, but I've got a couple of questions here, if you don't mind answering. Daniel, the question here, can you comment on maintaining data security as it relates to operational technology, equipment weaknesses, and vendor geopolitics?
Sorry, could you just repeat that?
The question here is, can you comment on maintaining data security as it relates to operational technology, equipment weaknesses, and vendor geopolitics?
Absolutely. Look, let me just tell you this story. The US National Security Strategy, at about dot point 3, says our greatest competitive advantage is our ability to form and execute alliances. Now, what you're seeing with AUKUS is the joint integration of not just the types of technologies that we use to bring a systematic force integration, to be able to use UK forces, Australian forces, and possibly now Japanese forces is a unified force, is a deterrent, but also that means that the information exchange between weapon systems, targeting systems, intelligence systems, and the dissemination of that information needs to move at the speed of the machine for you to have a competitive advantage. So we solve the problem of accessing that information and trust about who do I send that to, when do I send it to, and what can they do with it at the speed of the machine. And that's really what we solve. Solving that just for defence is a big enough market, but you can also then apply that to digital twin building, Industry 4.0, digitisation of manufacturing, healthcare, etc. So it is a massive market. Where we are right now, it's focusing on defence, is just the start of our journey.
And just one more, Daniel. What do you see as your key competitive advantages?
Well, right now, nearly all the 3 products that we have manufactured and are selling is the referenceability of where those tools are being used in the Australian Department of Defence, in the US, large banks, manufacturing. And I'll give you a key to that. Our competitive advantage is that we have never been to a competitive process. We've been sole sourced in every sale that we have done because we don't have strong competitors. So if I could put it that way, that's probably the best way to answer it.
That great, great answer and great presentation, Daniel. Again, many thanks for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure having you back on the webinar.
Thanks again, Paul. Cheers, everyone.